Welcome to the third video of my Making Browser Games series, and in the last video I covered variables as well as how to print messages to the console. And all of this code of course was done inside of the script tag, which was inside of our HTML. But let me again review the variable. A variable is just a storage location for certain data. It's a named memory location with data. And of course, this name for my variable can be something totally different. It could be var a is equal to Matt. I could do var capital A underscore B underscore C. You can basically make a variable name anything you want as long as you don't have numbers for the first digit, and as long as you don't have spaces like my space name. That wouldn't be correct, but you can do my underscore name 1 like that. So those are some rules for making variables, and I wanted to talk more about different kinds of variables. So in the last video I created one variable which was my name. It's the word name, and its value was equal to my name. This is called a string or a word. Strings are just words or letters like this. I created a string variable. I'm going to create a few more kinds of variables. The next one is called an integer, var, and then my number. I'm just making up the variable name. The name can be whatever you like. But this next variable I'm going to set equal to 1, semicolon. This means that my number is an integer. Integers are whole numbers. It could be negative 901, it can be 1, it can be 11, but whole numbers are integers. So the first kind of variable we have is a string, or words. Think of strings as words. Second kind is an integer. We have a third kind, var my float, which the name gives away. Floating variables, or floating point digits. A float variable has a decimal point. So you can do any decimal point here that you want. I don't know what the precision is or when this eventually breaks down, but floating variables have decimal points. And there is one other kind that I want to show for today, and that would be Boolean variables. And bool for short. A Boolean variable can only be true or false. And we're going to see lots of uses for these variables in the future. As we make browser games, we're going to be using Booleans. But let's think, why would you even have variables in games? Well, variables are useful. They store information. So maybe instead of name, in our future game, we would have player name. And then instead of my number, what if we had, let's say, score? Score is equal to 100. Floating points would be good for, say, health. Health is equal to 94.5. And then Booleans, true or false values, could be game over. The game is still running when this is false, but when game over is true, that would be a good time to quit the game. These are some of the purposes of variables, and we're going to be creating more of these in the future. And like I showed in the last video, you can output the variable names to the screen here, and you can see them in the console when you click F12, or if you just right click the page and then inspect, and then click over to console. That will do the same thing. So I'm going to print out all of these variables, and by print out I mean I'm going to put them up here in the console. That's what I mean by that. So I'm going to start with the player name, console.log opening parenthesis, player name closing parentheses, semicolon. And when I refresh the page, now I have, well, the same thing I kind of had in the last video, just my name. I'm going to do this with the other variables, console console.log score, console.log health, console.log game over, and of course we're going to see all their values to the screen like this. And all the numbers and the booleans are, in blue because they're not strings. The strings were in white. And like I said in the last video, there is a difference between having the variable name and having the variable name in quotations. The quotations means you want the message player name. Without quotations, then you get the actual value itself, which would be my name, Matt, there. Now to conclude this video, I'm going to show you a few operations that you can do with variables. So I'm going to delete this and start over with a new var number is equal to 0, semicolon. You can do some basic math operations with number. So I can say console.log number plus 1. And that will put out 1 to the screen. I can do, and let's make this more interesting. Let's make it 10. You can do other math operations. So instead of plus, I'm going to divide, which is just a slash sign. And then I'm going to divide it by 2. And we will get 5 to the screen. So I'm actually going to keep this going. I'm going to add another one. Console.log number times, which is just an asterisk, 2. And then we'll get 20. So 5, then 20. Console.log number minus 3. That would give us 7. And then finally, there's a special operator that most people haven't heard of, the Modulo Operator. And for people familiar with programming, you probably already know this. Console.log 10 modulo 2, which is just the percent sign. And modulo is a special operation. What it does is it takes 10 and divides it by 2, but the result is not 5, the result is the remainder. So when I run this, I get 0. That's because 10 divided by 2 is 5, remainder 0. But if I change this to 11 modulo 2, that takes 11, divides it by 2, and then the result is whatever's left over, which in this case is 1. Because 10 divided by 2 is just going to be, oh no, not 10, I said 11. 11 modulo 2 is 1. If I did 11 modulo 11, well, that's going to give us 0, because 11 divided by 11 is 1, but the remainder is 0. Modulo returns the remainder of a division. And this is useful for telling if numbers are even and odd, and we can do more of that in the future. Though those are the different math operations you can do on variables. But notice how if I say number divided by 2, and that changes, that gives out 5, but it doesn't actually change number to 5. Notice that. We get basically 10 divided by 2, then 10 times 2, then 10 minus 3, and then something different here. But why does the number not modify? Shouldn't, after this line of code, shouldn't number now be equal to 5? Well, I didn't actually change the value of number any of these times. I just did some math with the value. But here's how you change the value. If I wanted to add 5 to my number variable, I would type number plus, or actually there's a few ways of doing it. Number is equal to number plus 5. This basically tells the browser the number is going to be equal to whatever it was before plus 5. And then the result will be 15. Number is equal to whatever it was before plus 5. And just to prove to you that it is 15, I'm going to log it. I'm going to log the number. And I get 15. This time, number is actually changed. If I just put number plus 5, that doesn't do anything. I need an equal sign to actually change a number. That's why all these times, even though I take number divided by 2, multiply by 2, minus 3, the number is unmodified because there are no equal signs. And what I'll do, you can do the same operations. Number is equal to number minus 2, or number is equal to number times 2. Number is equal to number modulo 2. Now I'm actually changing the value each time, and I actually don't know what result I'll get. I get 0. Okay, why is that? That's because I take 10 and I subtract 2, so that's 8. Then I multiply by 2, I get 16. 16 modulo 2, that's 16 divided by 2. 8 remainder 0, 0. So number is 0. So you have, to conclude this video, you have different kinds of variables. We have strings, var my string is equal to, and then this could be a name or a word or anything. We have Boolean, which could be true or false. And then we have integers. And integers and floating point numbers really work the same here in JavaScript. I don't really need to distinguish them, but integers are just whole numbers, and floats are simply decimal point numbers. And that concludes this video. In the next video, I'm going to be covering user input and how the user can add data to our variables here so that we can get some interesting results.